Welcome back to Pink Slip Pavilion, where every Wednesday we share real stories of real people who have turned their pink slips into power moves, aka their layoffs into growth opportunities. If this is your first time here, make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button so that you never miss a story. This week we have the incredible Victoria Hanson and her story from corporate to canning. This pink slips the start, not the end. Welcome to the Pink Slip Pavilion, Victoria. I'm so excited to have you here. And for those of you that don't know, Victoria and I are actually friends, so this is going to be a fun conversation. So, welcome, Victoria.
Yay.
First off, let's start with, have you ever gotten a pink slip? Because that is the number one question in the Pink Slip Pavilion is we turn pink slips into power moves. Have you ever gotten a pink slip?
So I've actually been laid off twice, both from different staffing agencies, and my background is in staffing. So a majority of my career was at one specific firm. Loved it, loved the opportunity to grow, loved the opportunity to connect with clients, loved the opportunity to connect with candidates, loved the opportunity to meet amazing people and still keep in contact with them, like yourself. And then I actually went in-house to be a recruiter, and agency-wise, I was on the sales side. Absolutely loved it. Wanted to gain more experience. Went in-house as a recruiter. Absolutely loved it. Wanted to stay with that company forever and ever and ever. And then the layoffs hit.
So, pretty established in your career, you'd say, when this happened, and not just once, but more than once. What was your mindset? And I know we're talking about two different layoffs, so maybe walk us through mindset number one, and then, happened again within a shorter period of time. So, how did your mindset shift from one to two, or was it kind of consistent?
It was interesting because the first one, I was with the company for about 6 months and I wanted to stay with them for a very long time. And that was the goal. I started as a contractor. That company typically went from contract to hire. And I even talked with my supervisors, other team members, that I was going to get converted at that time. They typically convert people. Because they were on the internal side of things, they were typically privy to layoffs. But from the company level, the company cut the contract with all external vendors and didn't tell any of the hiring managers.
Mm.
So the managers that I worked with, the hiring managers and both my internal team were very surprised. And they actually made a few comments that because I had a different background, I was able to be successful and actually did I had a different mindset than the people that were currently there and found and filled roles faster because I came from staffing and you have to think outside the box. So a lot of those transferable skills made me really successful and they were really shocked and surprised. With that first life, it was hard. Like mentally, it was tough. Going from a place of wanting to be with a company for a while and liking the people I work with, liking the work, liking the impact I was making, to being laid off and never experiencing that before is difficult, especially when we're in a culture that when people hear layoffs, before the past few years where layoffs were more common, people would associate layoffs with your performance and you as a person and not necessarily understand that sometimes it's out of your control. And even initially talking to friends who haven't experienced layoff, it did feel like a little bit of judgment of, oh, you weren't good enough, so that's why you got laid off.
Oof, that's relatable. I know for a lot of people, because there is a stigma, which we are reframing with this podcast and these conversations. But I think I also want to highlight you also really thought that you were safe. Like you were being told by your leaders, oh, you're good. And so there's a lot of shock too that comes with that. So, how did your mindset shift going into the second layoff? Was it pretty consistent or was it a different experience?
I think from the first one, I was coming because I didn't, I've never experienced it before and I didn't know what to expect. And I knew at some point I was going to work again. I knew at some point things would change. My first layoff, I had a very scarce mindset of, oh, I can't spend any money. I can't do anything because I don't know when that next paycheck is coming. I don't know where it's coming from. At that time, there was a little bit of layoffs going on. So there is a lot more competition too of how am I supposed to make myself stand out when one, during that time frame, I changed my life completely. Before I was working in office, got approval to stay remote, stayed remote, went to this new company as a recruiter remote. And then all these companies are going back to office. Me being out of state in a state that no longer is a
Mhm.
big city was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. From that first mindset, also put a lot of pressure on my partner of I can't contribute right now. I can't do that. I think with a second mindset going through the first one, I was a lot more relaxed. Like I knew that eventually something is going to turn up. When you're faced in that situation where you have nothing else to do, you have to make it work. And that first layoff coming from a place of scarcity, I had to be creative and find different options of how to use my time. What would best move the needle forward, a sales term, what's closest to the dollar of how am I going to make money, but in a place that will support me in the long run of where I want to be, but also in the immediate of what do I do now and how do I help balance that now versus in the future. The second layoff, I had less of a scarcity mindset because I've been through it before and knew that I was going to make it work anyway, either way.
I think that is kind of relatable to like a second child. The first one, it's like you want to be cautious because you don't really know what you're doing. And the second one, you tend to see parents be a lot more relaxed. So like, I've been here before, right? I kind of know what to expect, and I don't really know what's coming next. But the shock and awe of going through something for the first time is gone. I've already been here. I know I'll get through it. I don't know what it'll look like, but I know that I'll survive because I've already survived it.
Yeah. And I think initially when you first go through that, you know that, like deep down, I knew that. In my heart, I knew that. I think I was filled with doubt. I was filled with the unknown. I was filled with, although I knew that was going to happen, did I truly believe it? Is a different story.
Oof, that's a good call out. So let's talk about how that shifted. So it's been a while since your layoff. How has your mind, how has your mindset evolved since the initial first and second layoff? Where are you now today mentally?
Mentally, I think you have to, there's always going to be something that's hard in the world. There's always going to be something that's challenging. Mentally, you have to find that strength within you. And it's a lot easier said than done. And we hear that all the time in society, in the media, everywhere. I had friends and family telling me everything was going to be okay, but it takes a lot of internal work to actually internalize it and believe it. Because when you're facing that situation and you're facing rejection after rejection, no response after no response, how the market is evolving and how the market is changing, and seeing how your life and your trajectory of your life has changed 180 degrees and will never be the same, you have to find that commonality and that peace within yourself because it's it's rough. It's rough out there.
It is rough out there, and I like that you called out the rejection piece because we're definitely seeing more of that than ever. And you and I have a background in staffing, so we've seen the changes in the market and with AI coming into the equation and just some of the things going on. So that's a very real feeling when you're being rejected every single day and at a high volume, just trying to kind of get to the next step. It can be incredibly mentally draining, and it can be hard to not go, well, maybe I should pity myself. Maybe the people that are like, I'm so sorry. What are you going to do next? Maybe they're right. Maybe I should live there. And it takes a lot to pull yourself out of that and go, you know what? One more step, one more step.
And it takes a lot to, when you're talking to people who haven't experienced what you're going through in that degree, it in a way is hard for them to understand or hard to relate because it's such a different mindset and such a different game than applying for jobs regularly. Because when you're applying for jobs regularly, and if you are working and have that boundary and that have that backbone, you have a different level of pressure. And when you keep getting those rejections over and over and over again, and you keep hearing that something's coming, something's, maybe that's not the right fit for you. At some point internally, you don't necessarily want to believe that, even if they are true, especially if someone hasn't gone through that experience, because it can seem, it's harder to relate to that in the moment. Um, so you have to find that balance of this is a temporary situation. Does it suck? Yeah. What can we do to make it not as bad? And how are we going to get through it? Because one way or another, you have to.
So, what did you learn about yourself kind of going through this? Did you discover anything new or like reconnect with anything that maybe you had lost in your corporate career? What did you learn?
I think the blessing is at that time for the first layoff, I moved and I was in a new area. And in my current situation at that time, I was in an area with a lot of fruit trees on my property, a lot of nuts, a lot of people around me doing more homesteading stuff of canning and baking breads and things like that. Um, I also moved into a place where I had the opportunity to start an Airbnb. With working, you get tired and you get burnt out, and your time goes elsewhere and your energy goes elsewhere. So one of the things I did to break up the applying and knowing that I'm not going to do that all day, every day, that I set a goal of how many jobs I wanted to apply to, how many jobs I wanted to follow up on, set my outreach strategy for my job search, but then also incorporated fun. So I took that time to actually focus on the tasks that I've been wanting to do for a while, but I just didn't dedicate my time to that and had that balance. So I did start an Airbnb, did go through finding the city permit and the licensure, finding the fire inspection and scheduling that, having to get all the items for the fire inspection, having to get all the items ready for the rental, having to understand how Airbnb works on the back end and the listing and taking the photos and writing the descriptions and trial and error with the photos, trial and error with the descriptions. I made a scrapbook. I loved to craft and be hands-on, and that was my hands-on project to get away from the computer of when I was working, I didn't necessarily want to do a scrapbook because the hardest part for me was finding the photos. I didn't, after spending 9 hours on a computer, I didn't want to look at my phone to spend another few hours to gather photos for a scrapbook.
Fair.
Um, During that time, I did. I found photos, was able to print them out, and was able to do a project I've been wanting to do for years, just put off because that was my hands-on project. I was able to can, I was able to make bread. Got really into more of that traditional lifestyle of gardening and focusing on the abundance of what was currently in my life and in ways that I can have it now and in the future.
I love that because I think a lot of times we think about abundance solely in like correlating it with money. And abundance is so much more than money. Money is a great tool and it's better to have it than not have it. We're not going to deny that. But abundance is everywhere in your life. And often we get so caught up chasing dollars, we forget to stop and go, wow, my life is actually very abundant. I just don't have the time to actually be grateful for it and interact with it in the way that I want to. And for context, she lives in Utah. So if you're wondering where this homesteading is and canning, and she lives in Utah, very cool place as well. But that's where the homesteading and canning and more traditional lifestyle is happening.
Hey, thank you. One of the things, my biggest takeaway too was we all have the time, but I chose to dedicate my time towards work. And granted, yes, I had to. I was working, so I had to. But my mindset shifted of we all have the same amount of hours in a day. So where you dedicate your time can be anything. And that's just how you want to allocate what you want to do. Um, because I found ways that I wanted to fill up my day with something productive. So I would treat the day as something productive for my job search, something productive for the house, something creative, and something physical for either me or the dogs. So I was able to just have that autonomy to focus on the things that nourishes my soul and actually live that to its full potential. And that is something I'm grateful for. And to this day, I'm very grateful because it really forces you to slow down and it really forces you to figure out how you're going to pull yourself out of that mindset in a lot of different ways. The mindset of having a stable career for a majority of your life and having that taken away from you, to having stable finances and knowing where your next paycheck is going to come, to everything that you thought would happen in the next few years not shifting and not happening the way you thought it was, to reinventing that and focusing on that abundance and that mindset and that gratefulness now, but also the financial aspect of I was more conscious of what I was spending. And I found ways to adjust that. Ways, for example, like I like to cook and I like to bake. So I started baking bread. Can I make this or do I have to buy it? And I got really into doing a lot of home cooked stuff and realized, holy moly, this isn't actually like this is one, it's a lot of fun. I made a lot of pastas, a lot of breads, a lot of homemade stuff. But two, it is cheap. It is significantly cheaper, but it's also a lot of fun and something that I wish I would do a lot more now still. I am working now, so it is a little bit different. But every once in a while, I'll do bust it out because it both is a cost savings, but also is better for your health and better for your
Mhm.
soul. Being involved every
Yeah.
step of the way.
So if you could tell yourself something like now, knowing what you know, looking back to you're talking to that version of yourself who's getting laid off for the first time or the second time, what would you want to say to her?
I think it's a lot easier to just do the second time because the second time I already had that mindset and I was like, I got this. It's fine. Um, well, it's fine. I'm
Everything's
actually
fine. Like the little room on fire with the coffee. Everything's fine.
and like the second layoff actually I mean, I don't want to say I was too relaxed because that's all perception and that's like I might think I was too relaxed, but if someone else was in my shoes, then it might have been a different story. So that's always it's never I don't want to take away from someone's experience, but my mindset was a lot more relaxed because I knew the benefits of having having that time, what I could do with it. And so I knew that at some point things are going to change. I think during the first layoff, one of the things that really helped me was I'm too young to not work. Like I have to work again. Um, and that's it was a very bare bones fact. Like I am too young, I can't retire. Like I will be working again. So I think the second time that helped a lot too of all right, I've been through this before. Does it suck? Yes. Am I going to face similar stigmas? Yes. I think the second time, although I was more relaxed overall, it is a little the challenge was on my resume. Now I had two short stints because I was laid off twice. And how do I capture that and present that to a potential employer while combating the stigmas of was she laid off because she was a bad employee?
Yeah.
Top performers don't get laid off, what that looks like.
And for the record, top performers do get laid off every single day. So if anybody's hearing that and going, "Oh man, I feel that way." No, we reject that. And there are so many people and I mean, top performers, like you are a top performer. I can speak from experience in that. I'm very confident in saying that. Top performers get laid off all the time. Businesses have to make hard decisions and there's a lot of strategy that goes into who you choose and why. Um, so what would you say to yourself? If you could just send yourself a little message from the future, what would you tell her?
I would say it's all going to be okay.
I love that.
I think it's all going to be okay. I think going through it a second time, it was a similar situation. I was very new to the company and I was brought on for a specific project. And the person that brought me on was actually laid off right before my layoff. And so they didn't really know what they were going to do with me. They didn't know if they were going to put me in a different department, if the project was still going to happen, if they weren't really sure. And then as they're figuring that out, I think it was part of larger conversations as a whole where they did do company-wide layoffs. I think what I would tell anybody too is there's no, like kind of what you said, there's a lot of different reasons why people are laid off. So I think that there's some people you might never know why. So you have to find that inner closure of there you might not know why. And that's okay. And that doesn't affect your performance. That doesn't affect what you bring. If anything, that shows you're more resilient because you have to get back on your feet. But understanding that there's a lot of questions or unknowns and any factor of what your life would look like if you weren't laid off, why you were laid off, what trajectory your life would have had if you weren't, if you are, if you went down this rabbit hole, this new line of work, whatever the case may be, there's always going to be that what if, and you're never going to understand why 100%.
That's such a powerful call out because it's kind of like when you go through a breakup and you don't ever really get the real reason or the real closure. You have to learn how to find it in yourself. Otherwise, you'll never be able to release it and move forward. Layoffs are the same way. You might never actually know. And you have to figure out how to make peace with that within yourself. And when people ask you, well, why did you get laid off? Not do this like, well, I still don't know, and let it dictate how you feel about yourself and the value that you bring. You have to figure out how to find that inner calmness. And that's a huge part of the work, right?
And even talking to future employers about that too, as you're interviewing, as you're talking to recruiters, you're going to be asked that question,
Yeah,
whether it's every time, every once in a while. And I think how you respond to that, you can respond to that with that doubt. And you can also respond to that with that confidence of, I don't know, this is what I bring, this is what I can do. But to your point about a breakup, I think getting laid off and any significant life changes like that, you do go through the stages of grief. Like you have
100%. Yeah, and you have to honor every stage. And I think that's another thing that we all struggle with grief in general is we want to skip stages and just kind of sweep things under the rug sometimes and go, nope, I don't even want to feel that. I don't want to think about that. I don't want to face that. And we need it to be able to really truly grow through and get to the other side of these things and go, you know what, I am better off. And this was a blessing for me, but that's not an accident. That's an intentional choice that you make to not neglect what you have to do to get to the other side.
and figure out what you want. Like that's a excellent opportunity to figure out how there's not many times in life where you get a pause.
Mm,
And having that pause to really take that time to look inward and see what was working before. What are those patterns, those day-to-day habits, whether it's work life, personal life, anything, do you want to keep with you? And how do you want to redefine your future? And there's not many times you get a blank slate to reimagine what you want your life to look like and have the opportunity to do exactly that.
so true. It's a blank canvas. So if there's someone right now that's watching who's walking through a layoff currently, maybe walked through one in the past, but hasn't gone through every stage of grief quite yet, or is afraid of a layoff in the future, what would you like to say to them before we close out the pavilion? What would be your words of wisdom, or what would you want that person to know if they were the one sitting across the screen from you?
That is a really deep question because there are a lot of different components to how you can answer that and what someone needs to hear, what someone wants to hear. But I think kind of what you talked about too of we are all resilient.
Hmm.
We will get through it. Things will be better. Things will change. Things will suck. And they will suck some more. And they'll be hard and they'll be challenging. But we are resilient. We will get through it with every good. There's a bad. With every bad, there's a good. And whatever stage you're at in this part of your journey, there is another side and there's another opportunity.
Love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us in the Pink Slip Pavilion. It's always a blessing for me to get the chance to talk to you, but thank you for being vulnerable and being willing to get on here and share your story with so many people. And I know that there will be someone in the audience that feels blessed by this, that sees themselves in this journey. So thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that you'll come visit us again sometime soon.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to be here and just share my story. And I'm excited that you're allowing others to share their story too. And you are the best, and everyone listening is the best. And never forget that.
Thank you so much. Well, there you have it. More proof that you can grow through not just one layoff, but even two. I hope that you're leaving this conversation inspired to take advantage of this extra time, reconnect with yourself, find new hobbies, find ways to redefine what you want life to look like next for you. You have that power, so take it back. And if you want to connect with Victoria, her contact information will be below. You can connect with her on LinkedIn. And of course, we'll be here every Wednesday because on Wednesdays we wear pink. And if you're not already subscribed, what are you doing? Make sure you do so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you next week.
This pink slips the style.